Welcome on board, chosen one. Sit down, breathe once, slow, and feel the shift that just moved through the room like a draft under a locked door. My name is Silas, and I have spent more years than I care to count watching how people break and how they rise, watching the ones the world writes off. And I noticed something long ago that the loud ones never understand. They looked at you and saw a lost sheep. A stray, something soft, something to be counted, herded, corrected, pitied. And that is the most beautiful mistake they will ever make. Imagine this: a shepherd's staff, worn smooth by decades of hands, leaning against a wooden gate at dusk. The staff that pointed at you. The staff that decided which pen you belonged in, which line you would stand in, which fate had already been signed for you. Remember that staff. It matters more than you know right now, because the story of what happened to the hand that held it is not finished, not even close. So let me ask you the questions this whole night is built to answer. What if the very thing they called your weakness was the weapon that was already dismantling them, and you simply never saw it move? What happened in the exact second the universe stopped counting you among the lost and started counting you among the ones who cannot be contained? And why, if you were truly just a harmless stray, do the people who once dismissed you now go so quiet when your name is spoken? Hold those questions. There is one truth underneath all of them that changes everything, and you are not ready for it yet. But you will be. Funny how the loudest shepherds go quiet the moment the head count stops adding up. There was a time they never lowered their voices around you. They spoke over you, about you, past you, as though you were furniture with a heartbeat. Now watch them. Watch how carefully they choose their words when your name comes up. Watch how the ones who used to laugh the loudest have developed a sudden interest in the floor. That is not politeness. That is instinct. Something old and animal in them finally caught the scent of what they let walk among them, and it terrified them into silence. Here is the truth they will never admit. When they called you gentle, they meant controllable. When they called you quiet, they meant no threat. When they called you a follower, they were describing the story they needed to believe so they could sleep. And when they called you lost, chosen one, they meant they had lost track of you, because a creature that only pretends to be part of the flock is the one thing a shepherd can never truly count. They looked at your softness and filed it under weakness, adorable. They looked at your patience and called it passivity, please. They mistook the way you watched everything, said little and moved slow, for a lamb that had given up. What they were actually looking at was a predator that had learned the single most dangerous skill in existence: stillness. The stillness of something that has already decided it does not need to prove anything until the moment proving it ends the argument forever. You know the feeling I am describing. The years of being talked down to. The meetings where your ideas were repeated back louder by someone with a firmer handshake. The rooms where you were the last considered and the first forgotten. The people who smiled at your face and rearranged your future behind your back. The ones who called you family until family became inconvenient. I have watched this pattern play out in 1,000 lives, and I have felt it carve its way through my own. The undervaluing, the quiet betrayals that were somehow always your fault. The loneliness of being surrounded by people who had already decided who you were. That loneliness was real. I am not going to soften it or dress it up. Being underestimated by people who should have known better is a specific kind of wound, because it makes you doubt the one thing you are most sure of, which is that there was something inside you they refused to see. The humiliation of being handled, the exhaustion of being small on purpose so the fragile ones around you would not feel threatened. That pain, deserves to be named plainly, because naming it is the first thing they never allowed you to do. Before we go one step deeper, touch the like button. Not for me, that is simply how the universe marks that you are here, that you showed up on the night this reached you. And now, stay with me, because everything you are told about that pain is about to invert. Here is the part that the shepherds spent their whole lives avoiding. The flock is not safety. The flock is inventory. And a wolf that walks inside the fence, that eats beside the others, that lowers its head at the right moments and waits, is not weaker than the ones outside the gate. It is infinitely more dangerous because it learned the language of the pen from the inside. You did not fail to escape the fence, chosen one. You chose to study it. They thought silence meant surrender. Instead, it meant you were listening to everything, memorizing every voice, learning exactly which hands held the staffs and which of those hands trembled when no one was watching. This is where the story they told about you begins to fall apart, thread by thread. And this is where the story you were always meant to hear begins. Funny how the confident ones start whispering the moment they sense the ground has shifted beneath them. When they used to speak about you, it was with the lazy certainty of people who believe the count would always come out the same. Now watch the recalculation happening behind their eyes. They are running the numbers again. They are wondering how they missed it. They are asking themselves the question that will haunt every one of them who ever underestimated you. What if it was never a stray at all? Let me translate a few more of the words they used, because the flock speaks in a code, and once you can read it, you can never be fooled by it again. When they said, "Be realistic," they meant, stay small enough that we never have to compete with you. When they said, "You are too sensitive," they meant you noticed something we hoped you would ignore. When they said, "Just be grateful," they meant, please do not realize how much more you are worth than what we gave you. And when they said, "You have changed," they meant you finally stopped performing the version of yourself that was convenient for us. That is the decoder ring, chosen one. Keep it. You are going to hear those phrases again in your life, from new mouths wearing old intentions. And now you will hear what is underneath them, the way a wolf hears a heartbeat under a coat of wool. Here is what I need you to understand before we go further, and it is the thing I built this entire message around. The universe has not shown you the full picture yet. What you have felt so far, the ache, the being overlooked, the strange sense that you were meant for something the flock could never contain, that was not the story. That was the prologue. The real story, the one the shepherds are terrified of, is only just beginning, and by the time we reach the end of it, you will understand exactly why they were right to be afraid all along. They spent so long describing you that they never once studied you. Description is what you do to something you own. Study is what you do to something that might turn on you. And the flock, the herders, the whole comfortable machinery of people who profit from keeping others small, they made the fatal error of the arrogant everywhere. They assumed the labels they pinned on you were the same as the truth of you. They are not. A label is a costume the powerful staple to the weak so they can predict them. You wore it. You wore it beautifully. And that is exactly what a wolf in sheep's clothing is supposed to do. Look who has gone quiet now. The ones who used to have so much advice for you. The ones who knew exactly what you should do with your life, your time, your choices, right up until the moment your choices stopped needing their approval. Their silence is not respect. Not yet. Right now it is confusion. It is the sound of people whose entire understanding of you just cracked down the middle, and who have not yet found new words to replace the ones that lied to them for years. Here is the truth they will never say out loud. The most dangerous person in any room is never the loud one. The loud one is announcing every move before making it. The loud one is spending energy on performance. The truly dangerous one is the quiet one in the corner who has already mapped every exit, every weakness, every fault line, and who is simply waiting, calm as still water, for the loud ones to exhaust themselves. That was you at every table where they underestimated you. Not lost, positioned. They saw a lost sheep. They saw the lowered eyes and thought submission. They saw the soft voice and thought harmlessness. They saw the patience and thought defeat. What none of them had the depth to perceive was that every single one of those traits is also the hunting posture of the most patient predator that ever lived. The wolf does not run at the flock the moment it enters the field. The wolf walks. The wolf blends. The wolf waits for the shepherd to turn his back. And you, chosen one, have been walking among them so long that they forgot you were ever anything other than one of them. You might ask yourself, if I was really so dangerous, why did I let them treat me that way for so long? Why did I swallow it? Why did I stay small? And here is the reversal that changes everything. You did not stay small because you were weak. You stayed small because you were not ready to spend what you had. And a predator that strikes before its moment is just prey with ambition. Restraint is not the absence of power. Restraint is power that has learned patience. You were not tolerating them, you were timing them. I have watched people mistake this restraint for cowardice their whole lives, including people watching themselves in the mirror. And I have watched the exact moment the restraint ends. I have seen the day the quiet one finally moves, and I have seen the faces of everyone who spent years assuming that day would never come. There is no expression in the human catalogue quite like the face of a person realizing they built their comfort on top of something they never understood, and it is now fully awake. Let me name the wound underneath all of this, because we circled it before and it deserves the full light. Betrayal. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet, institutional kind. The kind where the people who are supposed to be on your side quietly decided you are expendable and never told you. The kind where you found out your place in the pecking order, not from words, but from the pattern of small exclusions. That betrayal cut deep because it came dressed as normalcy. No one declared war on you. They just slowly, politely, made it clear you did not count. And you felt every degree of it, even when you could not name it, even when they insisted you were imagining things. That gaslighting was its own cruelty. Being told the fence was for your protection while it was clearly for their convenience. Being told you were free while every real door was quietly closed. Being told to trust the shepherds who were at that very moment deciding your worth by weight. I will not pretend that did not leave a mark. It did. It left several. But here is what the flock could never grasp about scars, and it is the truth this entire message turns on. Scars are not damage. Scars are proof of survival written in a language the weak cannot read. Every wound they gave you was also a lesson they were too foolish to realize they were teaching. Every betrayal was a map of who could not be trusted. Every exclusion showed you exactly where the walls were. They thought they were breaking you down. Instead, they were educating a predator at their own expense, funding your instincts with their cruelty, sharpening you on the grindstone of their contempt. You weren't the victim of that pen, chosen one. You were its most attentive student. And this is where the ground truly begins to move. Because a creature that has learned every inch of the enclosure, every guard, every routine, every blind spot, is no longer contained by that enclosure. It is simply choosing the hour. The fence stopped being a prison the day you understood it better than the ones who built it. From that day, everything they did to keep you inside was just them, unknowingly, handing you the keys, one grievance at a time. I want to speak directly to the years you spent feeling invisible, because that specific ache is the one the flock relies on most. Invisibility is the leash they never had to hold. If they could convince you that you did not matter, they never had to worry about what you might do. So they overlooked you at the celebrations. They forgot your name in the moments that counted. They handed the credit for your work to louder hands. They let you sit at the edge of every gathering, close enough to watch, never close enough to belong. And slowly that treatment tried to become your self-image. That is the deepest cut of all. Not what they did to your circumstances, but what they nearly did to your self-perception. They almost convinced you that the small role they cast you in was the full range of who you were. They almost made the costume feel like skin. And I say almost, because if it had fully worked, you would not be here on this night feeling that strange pull in your chest that says the story was always bigger than the pen. I have felt that exact pull. There was a stretch of my own life where I was the quiet one in every room, the one people spoke over, the one whose silence they mistook for agreement. For years I let them, and I told myself it was humility. It was not humility, it was calibration. I was learning the terrain of people who did not know they were being studied. And the day I stopped performing the small version of myself, the people who had defined me by it did not celebrate my growth. They resented it. Because my rising was, to them, an accusation about every year they had spent underestimating me. That is when I understood the wolf. That is when I understood you. Here is the truth they will never admit. They do not fear your anger. Anger they can handle. Anger is loud, predictable, easy to dismiss as instability. What they fear, what genuinely keeps the shepherds awake, is your calm. Your terrifying, unbothered calm. The calm of someone who has stopped needing their approval, stopped arguing for their recognition, stopped bleating for a place in a flock they never intended to share. Nothing frightens a manipulator more than a person who has quietly stopped reacting, because reaction was the only leash they had. If any part of this is landing in your chest right now, subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next messages built for the chosen ones only get sharper from here. And now we return to the thing they worked so hard to keep you from seeing. The loneliness you carried was never a sign that something was wrong with you. It was a symptom of something being right. A wolf raised among sheep will always feel alone, not because it is broken, but because it was never the same species. That gnawing sense that you did not quite belong, that you were performing a role that never fit, that everyone else seemed to understand rules you found absurd, that was not maladjustment. That was your true nature filing a complaint the flock could not process. The universe has not finished showing you what that nature is for. Hold on to that, because everything up to now has been the world describing the sheep. What comes next is the world remembering the wolf. And the shepherds, if they were smart, would already be running. They are not running yet. They still think the count adds up. Let them. Too late. This silence you are sitting in right now, chosen one, the quiet that has fallen over the ones who used to have so much to say about you, I need you to understand what it actually is. It is not peace. It is not them finally leaving you alone out of respect. This silence is their fear wearing a calm face. When a flock goes quiet, it is rarely because danger has passed. It is because danger has entered the field, and every animal in it has just realized at the exact same instant that something among them was never one of them. That shift you feel in the room, the way certain people no longer meet your eyes the way they used to, the way conversations soften when you enter, the way the old jokes at your expense have suddenly dried up, that is the sound of instinct overriding arrogance. They cannot articulate it. If you asked them what changed, they would stammer something vague, but their bodies already know. Their bodies are counting exits. And the pen they built to contain you has started to feel to them like a place with no lock they control. Here is where most people turn back. Right here. Because comfort is easier than truth, and it is far more comfortable to keep believing you are just a stray who got overlooked than to accept what you actually are. The lost sheep story is soothing. It asks nothing of you. It lets you stay a victim, and victims never have to become anything. Most who reach this exact point in the descent pull the wool back over their own eyes and return to the pen, because becoming the wolf is heavier than staying the lamb. But you are not here by accident, chosen one. The ones who reach this threshold and keep walking are a rare breed. You did not stumble into this message at 3 a.m. by chance. Something in you was already awake, already restless, already aware that the small role never fit, and that awareness is the thing the flock could never manufacture in you, no matter how hard they pressed. You are standing at the edge of the pen with the gate open. Most freeze. You are still moving. So here is the ritual, and I do not offer it lightly. Leave the number 777 in the comments. Not for luck, not for a trend, not because everyone else is doing it. Leave it because it is a signal, a mark that you crossed this threshold when most turned back, a quiet flare sent up by one of the few who refuse to keep pretending. 777. 3 sevens for the ones who were never truly lost, only unaccounted for. And while your hand is there, let that same touch land on the like, because the universe keeps a longer ledger than any shepherd ever did. And if you are truly one of the chosen, you already feel it. That pressure in your chest right now, that low hum of recognition, that sense that I am not telling you something new, but reminding you of something you buried to survive the pen. That feeling is not suggestion. That is your true nature answering a name it has not heard in years. Hold on to that pressure. We are going to follow it all the way down, and by the end you will know exactly what it was pointing you toward the whole time. Now we begin the real descent. Everything until now was the world describing the sheep. What comes next is the world remembering the wolf, laid out piece by piece, and each piece is a part of you they mislabeled, and you are about to reclaim. Number 1. The mask was never a disguise. It was a weapon you forged so early you forgot you were holding one. Imagine this. A blade being pressed into a bed of glowing coals, not to hide it, but to harden it, the fire changing something in its very structure that no eye could see from the outside. That was your gentleness. The world thought your soft exterior meant there was nothing underneath. They never understood that the softness was the forge, and the years of pressure were the flame, and something inside you was being tempered into a thing that does not bend the way ordinary things bend. You might ask yourself, but I really was kind. I really did care. So how could that be a mask? And here is the reversal. The kindness was real. That is precisely what made it lethal. A false mask fools people for a day. A true one A kindness that is genuine and yet gives away nothing of your depth fools them for a lifetime. You were not pretending to be gentle. You were being gentle while being something far larger underneath, and the flock only ever saw the surface because the surface was all their eyes were built to read. They took your softness for weakness. Cute. They took your warmth for an opening to be exploited. And in doing so, they walked closer and closer to the one thing they should have feared, mistaking the calm of the deep water for shallowness. I have watched countless people carry this exact gift and never know it, apologizing for their own gentleness as though it were a flaw. It was never a flaw. It was camouflage over a strength so complete it did not need to announce itself. That is your first weapon reclaimed, and it flows straight into the second. Number 2. Your patience was never you waiting for life to happen. It was you deciding when life would happen to them. Imagine this: a chess player who has not moved a piece in what feels like an eternity, while the impatient opponent shuffles and fidgets and mistakes the stillness for confusion. The stillness was not confusion. The stillness was calculation running so deep that every possible outcome had already been walked, and the move, when it finally came, would not be a move at all. It would be a conclusion the opponent had been losing to for 20 turns without knowing it. That was you at every table where they thought you had nothing to contribute. While they spent their energy performing, you spent yours observing. While they reacted, you recorded. They mistook your lack of visible motion for a lack of intention, and that mistake is the oldest one in the book. The wolf does not sprint the instant it enters the field. The wolf paces itself to the rhythm of the flock until the flock forgets to watch it at all. You might ask yourself, but doesn't waiting mean I lost my chances? No. Here is the truth they will never admit. The impatient burn their opportunities the moment they appear, striking too early, showing their hand, spending everything on the first door that opens. You held, and holding is not weakness, chosen one. Holding is the discipline of a creature that knows the difference between an opportunity and the opportunity. They called it passivity. They will call it something very different when they finally understand what you were counting all those silent years. Remember that shepherd's staff from the beginning, the worn one leaning against the gate? Here is the first thread of what became of the hand that held it. That hand grew so used to pointing at a lamb that it never noticed the lamb had stopped needing to be pointed anywhere. The staff still moves out of habit, but it is directing something it no longer controls, and somewhere deep in that hand a tremor has started that was not there before. We will follow that tremor to its source, but not yet. First, you need to understand what put it there. Number 3. What they called your overthinking was a threat detection system they should have envied. Imagine this: a lighthouse standing alone on a cliff at the edge of a dark coast, its beam sweeping endlessly across the water, seeing the wrecks before they happen, reading danger in the shape of the waves, while everyone in the warm village below sleeps and calls the keeper strange for never resting his eyes. That was your mind. The endless scanning, the noticing of things others missed. The way you read a room the moment you entered it, felt the shift in someone's tone, sensed the betrayal 3 moves before it arrived. They called it anxiety. They called it being too much in your own head. They told you to relax, to stop reading into things, to just go along. Of course they did. A predator's awareness is inconvenient to the people who benefit from your blindness. The ones who told you to stop noticing were, almost every time, the ones who most needed you not to notice what they were doing. Your vigilance was never a disorder. It was a sense so sharp the dull ones around you experienced it as an accusation. And here is where I promised you something earlier. the real reason the shepherds cannot sleep, and I said I would reveal it in time. We are almost there, but not quite, because you first need to understand this. The thing that keeps them awake is not what you might do. It is what you can see. A flock can tolerate a wolf it does not know about. What it cannot tolerate is a wolf that watches, that understands the whole machine, that knows precisely which hands tremble and which voices lie. Your awareness is the thing they truly fear, and we will name why in full very soon. You weren't paranoid, chosen one. You were perceptive in a world that punishes perception, and that perception flows directly into what comes next. They broke your trust and called you damaged. They were describing a fortress and calling it a ruin. The ones who breached you taught you where your walls were thin, and you rebuilt yourself into something they can never breach again. That is not brokenness, chosen one. That is the most valuable education a betrayer can accidentally provide. And every one of them who cracked you once has permanently locked themselves out. Because there is one more layer to your solitude that they never understood, and it is the sharpest of all. Number 4. Your isolation was never rejection. It was the wolf being unable to fake belonging to a species it was never part of. Imagine this: a single tree growing at the tree line high on a mountain, far above where the comfortable forest ends, twisted by winds the sheltered trees will never feel, standing alone not because it failed to grow among the others, but because it grows where the others cannot survive. That was your solitude. Not exile, elevation. You did not fail to fit into the warm, crowded valley. You were rooted somewhere the valley could not reach, and mistaking that altitude for loneliness was the flock's way of pulling you back down to where they felt safe. I told you earlier that I spent years as the quiet one in every room, and here is the part of my own story I rarely share. The day I finally stopped trying to belong to people who were never my kind, the loneliness I had feared my whole life simply dissolved. It was never loneliness. It was the discomfort of forcing a wolf to sit still in a pen and call it home. The moment I accepted I was not the same species, the ache turned into something else entirely. Freedom. The clean, cold freedom of a creature that no longer needs the flock's permission to exist. You might ask yourself, but I wanted to belong. I tried so hard to fit in. Doesn't that prove I was one of them? No. It proves you were merciful. You tried to make yourself smaller so the smaller ones would feel safe. That is not the mark of a sheep. That is the restraint of a predator that chose for years not to frighten the very creatures it could have scattered with a single glance. Your isolation was not their rejection of you. It was your quiet refusal to fully reveal what standing beside you would have meant. They saw a lonely stray at the edge of every gathering. They never once considered that the edge is exactly where a hunter stands, close enough to see all of them, far enough that none of them can see it clearly. Solitude was not your punishment, it was your position. And from that position, everything about them was visible, while nothing about you ever truly was. Now watch how these first 4 reclaimed weapons begin to lock together, because separately they look like flaws, but assembled they are the anatomy of something the flock was never equipped to survive. The gentle mask, the counting patience, the sleepless perception, the elevating solitude. 4 traits they mocked, 4 traits that are, in truth, the exact profile of the most patient hunter that ever walked among prey without being recognized. The shepherds have started counting again. Not the flock this time, their own losses. And this is where their arrogance meets the first real crack, because the ledger that once counted you as a small, manageable entry has begun returning a number that does not make sense to them. Number 5. The fear they instilled in you was never meant to protect you. It became your finest instrument the moment you turned it around. Imagine this. A storm rolling in across an open plain, and a herd scattering in blind panic while a single creature stands at the storm's edge, having learned so intimately what fear feels like, that it can now read the exact direction the panic will move. That was your relationship with fear. They used it on you for years, the subtle threats, the consequences hinted at but never named. The atmosphere of walking carefully so as not to lose the small place you were given. They fed you fear to keep you docile. But here is the reversal that unravels them. A creature raised on fear does not become weak to fear, it becomes fluent in it. You learned the anatomy of intimidation from the inside, every lever, every pressure point, every tremor it produces in the body. And a wolf that understands fear the way you now understand it does not feel it the way the flock does. It smells it on others. It reads it in a voice that pitches half a note too high. The very thing they used to control you became the sense that now tells you exactly which of them is afraid, and how afraid, and why. You didn't absorb their fear, chosen one. You reverse-engineered it. And the ones who taught it to you are now, without understanding how, the most transparent creatures in the field to you. Number 6. What they framed as your inability to move on was actually a memory built for the hunt. Imagine this: a river that never forgets the shape of the land, that returns after every drought to the exact channel it carved before, patient and inevitable, wearing down stone not with force, but with the refusal to forget where it was always meant to flow. That was your memory. The way you remembered every slight, every broken promise, every time someone showed you who they were, and then asked you to pretend you had not seen it. They called it holding grudges. They told you to let it go. Of course they did. The people who benefit most from your forgetting are always the ones who did something that deserved to be remembered. Your memory is not a wound that will not heal. It is a record that will not be edited. And here, finally, is the answer I promised you. The real reason the shepherds cannot sleep, delivered in full now that you can hold it. They lie awake because a wolf that watches and a wolf that remembers is a wolf that keeps a perfect account, and every one of them knows, somewhere beneath their calm face, that their entry in your ledger has not been settled. That is the source of the tremor in the hand that holds the staff. Not what you might do, what you have not forgotten. They thought your memory was a burden you carried. Instead, it was the map you were drawing. Every name, every face, every moment they reveal themselves, filed, dated, understood. They can rewrite the story to anyone else. They cannot rewrite it to you because you were there, watching, remembering, with the patience of the river and the eyes of the wolf. And that is why the silence around you keeps deepening. That is why the count keeps failing them. That is why the ones who once spoke so freely now choose their words like people walking across ice they suddenly do not trust. They are beginning to understand, one by one, that the stray they never bothered to study was keeping records the entire time. Good. The tremor in the shepherd's hand has spread. It is no longer confined to the one who held the staff. It has moved through the whole enclosure because fear, unlike courage, is contagious among those who share the same lie. And the lie they shared was simple. They told each other you were harmless. They repeated it so often it became furniture. Now the furniture is shaking, and none of them wants to be the first to say out loud, what all of them have started to suspect. Number 7. The trust you gave and lost was never you being naive. It was you learning the difference between a heart and a trap, and no lesson has ever made a hunter sharper. Imagine this: a fortress that was breached once, long ago, and rebuilt with the memory of exactly where the wall failed. Every weak stone replaced, every blind gate sealed, standing now not as a structure that has never known attack, but as one that has survived it and turned the wound into architecture. That was your trust after they broke it. They think they took something from you when they betrayed the openness you offered. They think they left you damaged. What they actually did was hand you the blueprint of your own defenses, showing you precisely where you were vulnerable so you could seal it forever. You might ask yourself, but doesn't losing trust make a person cold, closed off, unable to connect? No. Here is the reversal. You did not become closed, you became precise. There is a vast difference between a person who trusts no one out of fear and a person who trusts selectively out of wisdom. The first is a prisoner of the past. The second is a predator who has simply refined its instincts. You did not lose the ability to open the gate. You gained the ability to know exactly who deserves to walk through it. And that discernment is worth more than 100 easy trusts that lead to 100 quiet betrayals. They broke your trust and thought it made you smaller. Instead, it sealed the one crack an enemy could ever use. Every betrayer who breached you once has permanently locked themselves out, and that is the thread that carries us straight into the next thing they got wrong about you. Because the moments that truly forged you were never the crowded ones. They were the ones where they left you entirely alone. Number 8. The times you were forced to survive alone were never abandonment. They were the flock unknowingly training you to need nothing from it. Imagine this: a cocoon hanging in the dark, sealed off from every warm hand that might want to help, and inside it a creature dissolving completely, becoming formless, unrecognizable, before rebuilding itself into something with wings the caterpillar could never have imagined. A transformation that could only happen in total isolation, that would have been ruined by any well-meaning hand that opened the shell too soon. That was your solitude in the hardest seasons. It looked like abandonment. It was incubation. Here is where I told you, back near the middle of all this, that there was one truth that changes everything, but that you are not yet ready for it. You are ready now. The truth is this: the flock did not just fail to help you when you were alone. By failing to help you, it removed the one dependency that could have kept you tame forever. A wolf that learns it can survive without the flock is a wolf that can never again be controlled by the threat of losing it. Their neglect severed the leash they did not even know they were holding. They set you free by refusing to hold on, and they will never understand that their coldest moment was the moment they lost all power over you. You might ask yourself, but the loneliness of those seasons nearly destroyed me, how can something that hurt that much be a gift? And here is the answer that resolves it. The dissolution in the cocoon is not gentle, it is total. The creature does not survive that process intact. It survives it transformed. What felt like being destroyed was you being unmade, so that something the pen could never contain could take shape in the dark. The pain was real. It was also the price of wings, and wings are not issued to creatures that never had to leave the ground alone. They abandoned you and thought it was punishment. Instead, it was graduation. Every season they left you to fend for yourself, they were removing another thread of the dependency that keeps ordinary creatures obedient. You emerged owing them nothing, needing them nothing, tethered to them by nothing. That is the most dangerous condition a person the flock wants to control can reach. Total self-sufficiency. And they built it in you with their own indifference. Remember that shepherd's staff and the tremor that started in the hand that held it. Here is where the tremor becomes something the shepherd can no longer hide. Because a shepherd's entire authority rests on the flock's belief that it cannot survive without him, and when even one creature in the field demonstrates that it can, the illusion cracks for all of them. Your independence is not just your freedom. It is a message the whole flock receives whether the shepherd wants them to or not, and it is the most subversive message a pen has ever contained. Number 9. The moment they finally sensed what you were is the moment you had been walking toward the entire time, and there is no putting a wolf back into the wool. Imagine this. A single scent carried on the wind across the whole enclosure, the scent of the open field beyond the fence, and the instant a creature catches it, something ancient wakes that no gate can ever put back to sleep. That was the moment of your recognition. Not a dramatic scene, a quiet shift, felt more than seen, when the flock and the shepherds all sensed at some level below words that the count had always been wrong, that one among them had never belonged to the tally, and that this one had just caught the scent of what it truly was. This is the point of no return, chosen one. Before this moment, a return to the pen was still possible. You could still have pulled the wool back over your own eyes, still have chosen the comfort of the small story. But recognition is a door that only opens one way. Once a creature knows its own nature, no amount of coaxing, no reminder of the warm, crowded valley, no appeal to the way things always were, can unknow it. You cannot unlearn that you are a wolf, and the flock cannot unlearn that it lives beside one. You might ask yourself, but what if I am wrong? What if I really am just a sheep who imagined all this? And here is the reversal that ends that doubt permanently. A sheep never asks that question. A sheep never wonders whether it might be a wolf, because the thought would never occur to it, would never make sense to it, would never keep it awake at 3 in the morning, listening to a voice describe a nature it half remembers. The very fact that this resonates, that it pulls at something in your chest, is the proof. Sheep do not feel the pull of the open field. Only wolves do. Your doubt is not evidence against you. It is the last bleat of the costume, dying. They finally saw it, and it was too late to do anything about it. That is the cruelty and the beauty of the wolf in the wool. By the time the flock recognizes what walks among it, the recognition itself changes nothing about the outcome, because the wolf was never contained by their ignorance. Their ignorance was just a comfort they granted themselves. Now that comfort is gone, and what remains is the plain fact they spent years refusing to see. Never astray, never lost, only waiting for the scent of the field. The shepherds are gathering now, murmuring among themselves, trying to decide what to do about a thing they cannot name and cannot cage. Let them murmur. Their conference of confusion is just the flock realizing collectively that the fence was always for their comfort and never for your containment. They can't put you back, chosen one, and they know it. The gate stands open now, and the flock has scattered from its edge, giving you a wide berth the way animals instinctively do around something they have finally understood to be a different order of creature. This is the hour the wolf steps into the open field, not to destroy, but to become what it was always meant to be under an open sky. And here is where the reclaimed weapons stop being defenses and start being a way of moving through the world that nothing in the pen prepared them to survive. Number 10. The rage you swallowed for years was never a poison you were forced to hold. It was fuel you were saving for the day you had somewhere to point it. Picture the dam first and understand what it is really doing. An enormous reservoir sits still and silent on the surface, giving no hint of the immense force pressed against its inner wall, and at the base of that dam, turbines wait, built not to release the water in a destructive flood, but to convert every ounce of that stored pressure into power that lights an entire region. That was your anger. They told you to calm down. They told you to let it go, to be the bigger person, to swallow it and smile. And you did swallow it, but not because you were weak. You swallowed it because you understood, instinctively, that raw rage sprayed in every direction is just noise, and you were building something that ran on pressure, not on noise. You might ask yourself, but holding all that anger nearly ate me alive. Wasn't it slowly destroying me? Here is the reversal. It was destroying the version of you that had no outlet, no direction, no purpose to convert it into. But anger, chosen one, is not the enemy. Directionless anger is. The moment a wolf has a field to run and a horizon to move toward, the fury that once turned inward and gnawed at the ribs turns outward into pure forward motion. Every insult you absorbed, every unfairness you filed away, every time you were made small was another cubic meter of water rising behind your dam. And a dam does not exist to hold water forever. It exists to convert it into the kind of power that changes the whole landscape below. They mistook your restraint for the absence of anger. They congratulated themselves on how easily you took it. They never understood they were watching a reservoir fill, not a spirit break. And the ones who felt safest adding to your burden, the ones who assumed there would never be a reckoning because you never reacted, are precisely the ones standing downstream of the most force you have ever accumulated. You never lost your anger, chosen one. You banked it, and it has been earning interest for years. But raw force alone was never what made you dangerous. It was the second thing rising beside it, the appetite they tried hardest to shame you out of. Number 11. Your hunger, the restless dissatisfaction they told you to suppress, was never ingratitude. It was the instinct of a creature that was built to hunt and refused to starve quietly in a pen. Imagine this. A great cat, born in a cage, fed just enough to survive, told that the small square of concrete was the entire world, and yet pacing, always pacing, driven by an appetite the cage was never designed to satisfy, an appetite that was not a flaw in the animal, but proof it was made for a territory the size of a plain. That was your hunger. The dissatisfaction that would not quiet no matter how much they told you to be content with your portion. The sense that there was always more, that the small life did not fit, that something in you was starving even when your basic needs were met. They called it ingratitude. They called it never being satisfied. They told you to want less, to lower your expectations, to make peace with the portion you were given. And here is where I have to tell you the part of my own story that took me longest to understand. For years I mistook my own hunger for a defect. I thought there was something wrong with me for never being able to settle into the small, comfortable life the flock kept offering. I tried to shrink my appetite to fit the cage. It nearly hollowed me out. And then one day I understood. The hunger was not the problem. The cage was. My appetite was not oversized. My enclosure was undersized. The moment I stopped trying to starve my nature and started trusting it, the same hunger that had tormented me became the exact force that carried me out of the pen for good. You might ask yourself, but isn't wanting more just greed? Isn't contentment the wiser path? Here is the reversal. Contentment inside a cage is not wisdom. It is surrender wearing the mask of peace. There is a contentment that comes from having found your true territory, and there is a false contentment they sell you to keep you from ever looking for it. The flock loves the second kind. It calls the hunger that would free you a sin, because a satisfied prisoner never tests the fence. Your dissatisfaction was never greed, chosen one. It was your nature refusing to accept a portion sized for a smaller creature. They wanted you grateful for scraps. They wanted your hunger dead. Instead, your hunger was the one part of you that never fully accepted the pen, the one instinct that kept pacing even when the rest of you was tired, the one signal from your true nature that would not go silent no matter how they tried to shame it into stillness. That hunger did not weaken you. It kept you alive to the truth long enough to reach this exact moment. And now, in the open field, it stops being torment and becomes the drive of a hunter that finally has a horizon worthy of it. If you have felt that hunger your whole life and finally understand what it was for, share this with the one other person you know who was also called a lost sheep, because the chosen do not rise alone, and someone out there needs to hear their nature named the way you just heard yours. Now watch these two weapons combine, the banked fury and the untamable hunger, because together they are the engine of everything that happens next. The rage gives you force. The hunger gives you direction. A creature with only anger burns out. A creature with only hunger drifts. But a creature with both, pointed at the open field, moves with the terrible efficiency of something that has finally stopped fighting its own design. Number 12. Everything you endured was never a series of unrelated wounds. It was a single, deliberate education, and you have just reached the moment it was always preparing you for. Imagine this. A blacksmith's apprentice who spent years being handed tasks that seemed pointless and punishing, hauling coal, tending fires, ruining piece after piece, enduring the heat and the failure and the endless repetition, never told what any of it was for. Until the day the master finally placed the real work in his hands, and every meaningless task suddenly revealed itself as a rung on a ladder he had been climbing all along, without knowing there was a top. That is what your suffering was. Not random, not meaningless, not bad luck. A curriculum. Here is where I make the promise I have been circling this entire time. The one truth I told you would reframe all the others, delivered now in full. Every single thing they did to you, every betrayal, every exclusion, every underestimation, every season of solitude, every swallowed word and banked fury and shamed hunger was teaching you a specific lesson that could not have been taught any other way. The betrayals taught discernment. The exclusions taught self-sufficiency. The underestimation taught patience. The solitude taught transformation. The suppressed anger taught power under control. Taken one at a time, they looked like a life of quiet defeat. Assembled, they are the complete training of a creature the flock could never produce on purpose and could never survive by accident. You might ask yourself, but if it was all preparation, does that mean the pain was necessary? Does that mean I should be grateful to the ones who caused it? Here is the reversal, and it is the sharpest one yet. No. You owe them no gratitude. A blacksmith deserves credit for a blade he intended to forge. Your tormentors intended to break you, not to build you. The fact that their cruelty produced a weapon instead of a wound is not to their credit. It is to yours. They aimed for destruction and accidentally forged something magnificent. And the transformation is entirely your victory, not their gift. You do not thank the fire for the strength of the steel. The fire was only trying to consume it. The steel earned its own hardness by refusing to melt. This is the thing your whole descent has been moving toward. Not revenge. Something far larger and far more permanent than revenge. Revenge would keep you tied to them, circling back to the pen to settle scores, spending your new power on the small creatures who never understood you anyway. What you are being prepared for is not to return to the pen as its destroyer. It is to leave it forever as its graduate, carrying an education they never meant to give into a territory they will never be able to follow you into. The reckoning is not that you will hurt them. The reckoning is that you will surpass them so completely that the pen and everyone in it becomes a footnote in a life they cannot even imagine. Remember the shepherd's staff, the tremor in the hand, the way it spread through the whole enclosure. Here is what the tremor finally means, now that we have arrived. The hand that held the staff is shaking because on some level the shepherd has understood the deepest truth of all. He was never your master. He was your unwitting teacher. And a teacher who intended to keep his student small, only to watch that student outgrow everything he had to offer, feels a very particular kind of dread. Not the fear of being attacked, the fear of being left behind, of being revealed as the smaller creature all along, of watching something he tried to diminish walk out of his reach and never look back. That is the second to last layer, chosen one. The understanding that your entire life of being underestimated was, without anyone intending it, the exact forge required to make a creature the pen could never hold. One layer remains, and it is the one that seals everything. The field is open now, and the wind carries the scent of everything the pen kept from you. This is the final layer, chosen one, the one that seals the whole transformation, and it is not about them at all. It is about what remains standing when every label they gave you has been stripped away, and only your true nature is left, breathing in the open air. Number 13. The identity they assigned you was never who you were. It was the shape they needed you to hold so they could sleep at night, and the moment you set it down, you found the self that had been waiting underneath the entire time. Imagine this. A statue carved from a single block of marble, buried for centuries under layers of plaster and paint that someone had smeared over it to make it look like a common thing, an ordinary decoration, until at last the false coating cracked and fell away in sheets, revealing beneath the plaster the very thing it had been hiding all along, a masterwork of stone that had been complete from the very beginning, waiting only to be uncovered. That was your identity. The lost sheep, the quiet one, the harmless stray, the follower, all of it plaster, smeared over you by hands that needed you to look ordinary. And underneath, unchanged, complete, was the thing you actually are. You might ask yourself, but how do I know the wolf is the real me and not just another story, another costume? Here is the reversal that ends the question forever. A costume must be maintained. It drains you to keep it upright, day after day, and it slips the instant your attention wanders. The sheep identity exhausted you precisely because it was the costume, and costumes are heavy. But the wolf, chosen one, requires no maintenance at all. It is what remains when you stop performing, when you set everything down, when you are too tired to pretend. You do not have to work to be the wolf. You have to work to be anything else. That effortlessness is how you know. Your true nature is not the thing you build. It is the thing left standing when you stop building. They gave you a name and hoped you would answer to it forever. And for years you did, because a young creature raised among a species that outnumbers it will answer to whatever it is called. But a name given by those who fear you is not your name. It is their leash with a word for a collar. And the day you stopped answering to it, The leash did not tighten. It simply fell to the ground because it was never attached to anything real. You were never the lost sheep. You were the marble under the plaster, complete since before they ever touched you. And the moment you feel that, the last question left is not who you are. It is what you were always free to do about it. Number 14. The freedom you feel now is not the arrival of new power. It is the recognition that the power was always yours, and the only thing that ever changed was that you stopped asking permission to use it. Imagine this. A great bird that lived its whole life in a cage with the door left open, never flying, held in place not by any bar, but by the word repeated over it so many times that it never tested the air, until one day it simply stepped off the perch out of instinct, and the wings that had been folded its entire life opened as if they had always known exactly what to do, and the ground fell away, and the cage became a small thing far below that had never once actually held it. That is the freedom you are standing in now. Nothing was added to you. Nothing new was given. The door was always open. The wings were always yours. The only cage was the belief that you needed someone to unlock it. Here is the last piece of my own story, chosen one, the one I have been saving for the end. The day I finally stepped off the perch, I braced for the fall. I had been told my whole life that without the flock, without the shepherds, without their permission and their small assigned place, I would drop like a stone. I stepped off, expecting to plummet, and I did not fall. The air held me the way it had always been ready to. Every warning they had given me about the danger of leaving was a lie told by creatures who could not fly, projecting their own limits onto a thing they never understood. The fall they promised me does not exist for our kind. It never did. It was the story the caged tell to keep company in the cage. You might ask yourself, but what if I step off and there is nothing there? What if they were right? Here is the final reversal. The ones who told you that you would fall have never once flown. They are describing a fear, not a fact. They cannot tell you what is beyond the fence because they have never been beyond it, and the only wisdom they have about the open field is the wisdom of the afraid, which is no wisdom at all. You do not take flying lessons from creatures that chose the cage. You take them from your own wings, which have been ready since the beginning, waiting for the single moment you stopped believing the ones who could not fly. The freedom is not new power, chosen one. It is old power, finally unleashed. Everything you needed was already inside you, sealed behind a door that only ever locked from your side. The shepherds never held the key. They only convinced you the key existed, and that they were the ones who kept it. There was no key. There was only a door you were always free to walk through, the instant you stopped believing you were not. Number 15. This was never a story about becoming the wolf. It was the story of remembering you were the wolf all along, and now that you remember, there is no version of you that can ever forget again. Imagine this. A river that was dammed and diverted and forced through narrow channels for years, made to run where it was told, made to power the mills of others, made to forget the sea it was always flowing toward, until at last the dam broke, and the river remembered, in a single unstoppable instant, the one thing it had never actually lost, which was its direction. And it moved toward the ocean not as a choice, but as a homecoming, because the sea had always been where it was going, and the dams had only ever delayed the inevitable. That is what you are, chosen one, not a sheep who became a wolf who was dammed, diverted, and told to forget the field, remembering now, in this instant, the truth that was never actually taken from you, only delayed. Remember the shepherd's staff, worn smooth by decades of hands, leaning against the wooden gate at dusk, and the tremor that started in the hand that held it and spread through the whole enclosure. Here is what became of that staff, the ending of the thread I began at the very start. The hand that held it finally understood, and it lowered the staff, not in surrender to you, but because it had nothing left to point at. The creature it was built to direct had walked through the open gate into the field, and a shepherd's staff has no power over the open field. It is a tool for the pen. Beyond the fence, it is just a worn stick in a trembling hand, and the shepherd, standing alone at the gate, watched the thing he spent his life underestimating disappear over the horizon into a life he could not follow and could never comprehend. He did not lose a sheep that night. He lost the illusion that he had ever owned one. And here is the truth this entire descent has been carrying to you, chosen one, the one that seals all 15 layers into a single, unbreakable understanding. You were never lost. You were never astray. You were never the weak one, the small one, the harmless one, the follower, the sheep. You were a wolf who chose to walk among them, who studied the pen from the inside, who wore the wool with such patience that they forgot there was ever anything beneath it, and who waited, calm as still water, for the moment you are living right now, the moment of remembering. And a wolf that remembers itself is the one thing in all the world that no fence, no staff, no shepherd, and no flock can ever contain again. They looked at you and saw a lost sheep. That was the most beautiful mistake they will ever make. And now, standing in the open field with the wind in your face and the pen shrinking behind you into a footnote, you understand at last why they were always right to be afraid. Not because you will return for them, but because you never needed to. You simply walked out, whole, remembering, free, and left them counting an enclosure that will forever be short exactly one, the one they never truly had, the one that was never theirs to keep. This is not the end of your story, chosen one. It is the first line of the one you were always meant to write. You are untouchable now, not because nothing can reach you, but because nothing they hold has any grip on what you have become. Unrepeatable, unclaimed, and unmistakably awake. I have watched a great many people walk out of that gate over the years, and I can tell you the ones who never return are the ones who finally stopped waiting for the flock to admit what you already know tonight. You were the wolf all along. You always were. And now you know. So before you walk into the field as someone the pen can never take back, seal it. Touch the like, subscribe, and leave the number 777 in the comments. Not for me, not for the algorithm, for the creature you just remembered you were. If this reached the wolf in you tonight, stay close, because the ones who remember their nature are never truly alone, and there are more of us out here in the open field than the pen ever wanted you to believe. The gate is behind you. The field is yours. Walk.